25. The initial debate and the composition of the essay. To treat the external problem, we shall deal with some declarations by Rousseau himself in addition to the quotations from Duclos. First, an important passage from the Confessions. From it one may at least conclude that the essay, originally conceived as an appendix to the second discourse, was, in Rousseau's mind, quite separate from his first writings on music. The time is 176-1. Besides these two works and my Dictionnaire de musique, at which I worked from time to time, I had some other writings of less importance, all ready for publication, which I intended to bring out, either separately or in a general collection of my works, if I ever undertook to produce one. The most important of these, most of which are still in manuscript in the hands of Duperrot, was an essay sur Irogenie de Longuis, which I had read to M. de Malesherbes and the Chevalier de Lorenzi, who expressed his approval of it. I calculated that all these works together, after all expenses, would be worth to me at least 8,000 or 10,000 francs, which I intended to sink in a life annuity for myself and Therese. After this, we would go and live together in the corner of some province, p. 560, pages 580-81. Malesherbes advised him to publish the essay separately. 25. All this happened in 176-1, at the time of the publication of Émile. From the external point of view, the problem does seem simple, and we can consider it as closed more than 50 years ago by Masson in an article of 191. 3-26. The polemic had been opened by Espina's. 27. Fastening upon what he considered to be contradictions in Rousseau's thought, he was already stressing what in the essay and even in the article Économie politique in the Encyclopedia, an article that poses analogous problems of dating and of internal relationships with the discourse, seemed to him to oppose the second discourse. Thus, for example, the discourse, which begins by setting aside all facts in order to describe an ideal structure or an ideal genesis, is in his view incompatible with the essay, which calls to some extent upon genesis, alludes to names like Adam, Cain, Noah, and deals with a certain factual content which belongs to history as well as to myth. One must of course study carefully Rousseau's usage of this factual content, and examine if, by using it as a guide to reading or to pivotal examples, Rousseau does not neutralize it as fact, a step which he permits himself to take in the discourse as well, notably in those notes to the discourse among which, as we know, the essay was perhaps supposed to be included. Whatever the case may be, unlike Starobinsky, Espina's does not conclude from this supposed contradiction that the essay came before the discourse. The essay on the origin of languages considering the quotations from Duclos, he draws the opposite conclusion. The essay came after the discourse. 28. Lanson then contests this interpretation. 29. But always on the same grounds, the discrepancy between the essay and the major works. For the sake of the philosophical reasons which constitute the real stakes of this debate and indeed animate it, Lanson wishes at all costs to preserve the unity of Rousseau's thought as it was to fulfill itself in its maturity. 30. He must therefore relegate the essay to a place among the works of Rousseau's youth. The essay on the origin of languages is certainly in contradiction with the discourse on inequality. But what proof does M. Espina's have for placing the former chronologically after the latter, and very close to it? Some passages quoted by Rousseau from a work by Duclos that appeared in 1754. What value does this argument have, since it is known moreover that the text of the essay was revised by Rousseau at least once or twice? The quotations from Duclos could have entered the text at one of those revisions. For my part, I have reason to believe through certain positive indications that the essay on the origin of languages dates from an epoch when Rousseau's systematic views were not yet formed, and that under its original title, Essai sur I Principe de la Mélodie, it was a reply to Rameau's Demonstration du Principe de l'Harmonie, 1749-1750. By its matter and tenor, the essay comes out of the same current of thought which exists in Condillac's An Essay on the Origin of Human Knowledge, 1746, and in Diderot's Lettres sur les Sourds et Muettes, 175-1751. I should be much inclined to place the composition of Rousseau's essay at the latest in 1750, between the composition and the success of the first discourse. It is difficult to consider the quotations from Duclos as late insertions. Even if in fact they were, as quotations, late, the reading of the commentary on general grammar seems to have deeply marked, indeed inspired, the entire essay. As for affinities with Condillac and Diderot, they are far from limited to this work alone. That is why, on this problem of chronology whose external aspect is so difficult to delimit, Masson's response to Lanson seems eminently convincing to me. Here I extract a long fragment of it. Recalling Lanson's argument, Masson writes, these arguments are very skillful and almost convincing, but perhaps they presented themselves to M. Lanson only because he did not wish to find Rousseau in contradiction with himself. If the essay had not seemed to contradict the second discourse, who knows if M. Lanson would have pushed the original version so far back. I do not wish to examine here the internal relationships between the essay and inequality. In my opinion, the contradiction between the two works is not as certain as M. Lanson judges. I shall limit myself to two external remarks that seem decisive to me. 1. The manuscript of the essay on the origin of languages is still at the Library of Neuchâtel, number 7835, 5 paper-bound books, 150x23 bound, with a blue silk ribbon. Very beautifully written, obviously intended for the press, it carries on the first page, by J.J. Rousseau, citizen of Geneva. It is without a doubt the copy that Jean-Jacques transcribed in 176-1, when he thought for a while of using this work in reply to that Rameau who continued to mistreat him so villainously, letter to Malesherbes, 925.61. Later, very likely at Modiers, as we shall see, he took the copy up again for revision, additions, or corrections, easily recognizable, for the ink and the writing are quite different. If I were studying the essay itself, 32 these variants would be worth noting, but I have kept only those corrections which are of chronological significance. In the copy of 1761, the text forms a whole, it is one dissertation, the division into chapters was introduced in Modiers' revision. Thus it is not only to chapter 20, but to the entire essay that the last lines of the work apply. These superficial reflections, which hopefully might give birth to more profound ones, I shall conclude with the passage that suggested them to me, to observe in fact and to show by examples, the degree to which the character, customs, and interests of a people influence their language, would provide material for a sufficiently philosophical investigation. pp. 73-74. This passage is extracted from Duclos' books, Remarques sur la grammaire générale et tirés en euro p. 11, which appeared in the first half of 1754. 2. We have also a more formal testimony given by Rousseau himself. About 1763, he wished to bring together in one small volume 3 short works that he had in hand, L'Imitation Théâtrale, Essay on the Origin of Languages, L'Élévi d'Ephraim. The collection was never published, but a projected preface remains in one of his notebooks of rough drafts, MSS of New Chattel, No 7887 Fob 1°4-5. From that preface I omit what concerns theatrical imitation and the Levite, and publish the paragraph concerning the essay 33. The second part was at first nothing but a part of the discourse on inequality, that I cut off from it as too long and out of place. I do walk it up again. Rousseau had at first written, I completed it provoked by M. Rameau's errors on music. That title which is perfectly fulfilled by the work which bears it but for 2 words that I had struck off in the encyclopedia. However, restrained by the ridiculousness of holding forth upon languages when one hardly knows one, and, furthermore, discontented with that fragment, I had resolved to suppress it as unworthy of public attention. But an illustrious magistrate, who cultivates and protects letters males herbs, thought of it more favorably than I defer with pleasure, as one may well believe, my judgment to his, and with the help of other writings, I attempt to pass off a piece that I might not have risked by itself. It does not seem that any internal evidence can stand against this testimony by Rousseau himself. In 1754, then, the essay on languages was a long note to the second discourse. In 1766-1, it became an independent dissertation, augmented and corrected to make it a riposte to Rameau. Finally, in 1766-3, this dissertation, revised for one last time, was divided into chapters.